what a day. Torrential rain, wind. It's really cold and damp and horrible. So I am just saying farewell to the sun. It will be going down and it'll be gone in another hour or so. And I'm going to put a fire on so that we can keep warm. It's days like today when we really appreciate a good fire. There we go. So I'll be lovely and cozy very shortly because this is an eco stove, so it's incredibly efficient. We need very little fuel. And what I'm burning here is our own wood from trees that were felled in Stormy Owen and the storm before that. So they've matured and seasoned and they make brilliant kindling and small logs. And of course we've got turf from the bog, which is only 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. And, you know, on days like this, when you really, really, really appreciate a lovely, warm, cozy fire, it makes me think back to, you know, those very early days of humanity when we were sitting around a fire. And, you know, they do call a fire caveman TV because you can become mesmerized by the flames. You can see stories, you can use the fire for divination. And it's just so comforting. It makes you feel so safe and secure. And the tradition of a hearth in Ireland is very, very important to our culture because the hearth was always the centre of the home and it's where people gathered. And really, this is where everything happened. It was also the heart of the home because we would cook on the fire and we would sit around the fire to keep warm. And it's where people would gather to tell stories. And if there weren't stories to be told, we could see the stories in the flames. We get our turf from the bog, which is just a couple of miles up the road. The bog is a beautiful place. It's very lonesome. It's a very liminal kind of space. It's magical and full of mystery. And there are lots of stories about the bog. And it's as if the stories are embedded in each sod of turf. And when we burn the turf, we release the stories into the fire, into the flames. And harvesting the turf is part of the agricultural year. And thinking about the wheel of the year, the sacred element of fire is in the south, but it corresponds to the age of man when we're in our heyday, when we're full of passion and vigour and enthusiasm for life. So I think that humanity has kind of developed alongside fire. You know, from very early man, caveman, fire would have come with us since those early days, and it's been a really important part of our story throughout the multi-millennia. Fire has been used in magic, it's been used for cooking, it's been used for just keeping warm, helping the sick recover. It's transformative. It is a sacred element, but it's something to do with the heart of ourselves as well, because when we sit around a fire together, it helps us to unify, it helps us to pull together, it makes us feel together we are more than, you know, just the individuals. We are something to be reckoned with. And you know yourself, even if you don't have a fire in your home, if you go out to a bonfire, people gather, they gather together, they sing, they're happy, they eat together. And there's just something really magical about a fire and so comforting, as I said. Another flame, apart from the hearth flame, is the candle flame, which is so soft and restful. And we're coming to Samhain, and it's nice to spend an evening just by candlelight to reflect on, well, this is what we do, reflect on all our ancestors did for us to live the life that we have today. and it gives us a chance to be grateful and to think back to the hard times our elders went through, and to be grateful for everything they did for us. So apart from the hearth flame and the candle flame, in Ireland there's the tradition of the forge flame from the blacksmith's forge, because in the past we were warriors, we needed weapons to be forged, and we were farmers and we needed agricultural tools to be forged. So the forge has travelled through history all the way till very recently, and there's a lot of magic associated with the forge, because the idea that somebody could take a rock and melt it down and beat it and hammer it and turn it into a beautiful sword or a beautiful piece of jewellery or a wonderful tool was seen to be something completely magical, and only some people could do it. And so you could go to the forge and get the water from the forge, which had cooled the iron implements or the weapons, and you could use it for your health and for magic and for all manners of things that have been lost. But Bridget, who is an Irish goddess that I follow, I suppose, is very much associated with those three flames. And then, of course, the flame in the head, because our ancestors, the druids and the shamans of the past, believed that creativity was born of fire, that flame in the head was the creative process. And whether that was poetry or making something or painting a picture, that creativity flowed from fire. So fire is inspiration, fire is regeneration, fire is cleansing, fire is a sacred element, as I was saying. And I'd just like to finish off by reading a couple of things from John O'Donoghue, who writes beautiful, beautiful prose. He's a very well-known philosopher, a spiritual philosopher, and he's talking here about smouring the fire, because in my grandparents' day, and even up until, I'd say, the 70s, people who had an open hearth fire would smoor the fire, which meant you would kind of cover it up so that it just ticked away overnight. It didn't burn up, it just stayed alive, so that in the morning you could rake through the embers and set a new fire again. So you didn't have to use more tinder, more kindling, the fire would just go again. And that meant that in some houses, as he says, and certainly I would have seen it in my own family's house, the fire could be going for days and days and days. It could go for years, it could be intergenerational, depending on on each household and the people in the house. But smouring of the fire was a very, it was an art. You had to know what you were doing, otherwise you would suffocate the fire and put it out. But apart from the smouring of the fire, it also lends itself to our folklore. So for example, at Samhain, you would smoor the fire, and you might leave a little stool next to the fire for an ancestor to come and warm themselves. And at Bridget's time at Imbolc, again, you would be smouring the fire specifically so that Bridget could come and take some rest and warmth from the fire, because it was believed she was walking the land on Imbolc Eve. So what he has to say about smouring the fire: its sound captures exactly the powdered smother of ashes that quenches and slows the desire of the coals to go up in flames, yet holds them alive and kindled. The day's work over, the coals are banked inside the night ashes and live until they are called to warm a new dawn. And he quotes here, because again, in our past times, there were prayers and chants and songs about all aspects of life, whether it was going to bed at night, whether it was getting up in the morning, whether it was milking the cow. And there's a chant here for smouring the fire. And it's a blessing on the fire at night. And it goes like this. And this is within the Celtic tradition, because you'll find this in the Highlands of Scotland and on the islands of Scotland, as well as in Ireland. So I smoor the hearth as Mary smoors it, The vigilance of Bridget and Mary be upon the fire and upon the floor and over the whole household. Who stands on the grass outside, sun-bright Mary and her son, the mouth of God requested, the angel of God spoke. Angels of promise guard the hearth until bright day visits the fire. And of course, when bright day arrives, we've got the fire in the sky, which is the sun. And all of those 8 festivals are recognizing the role of the sun in our lives. How, the sun is growing from winter solstice. It's visible there. It's doing its job for Imbolc, for the sowing of seeds. And it gets stronger and more powerful as it goes round the wheel of the year, until as we're moving back up to Samhain, the sun is waning and going for its own rest, which is what we're all beginning to do at this time of year. So one more little point that I want to mention that John O'Donoghue refers to is how I said at the beginning, when the visitors came, you would sit around the hearth fire and the stories would be told. And he explains it as such. The hearth was also the place where great conversations took place. In our times, knowledge and wisdom seem to be reduced to the information highway. We forget that until very recently, civilization was handed on through the written word and the oral tradition. So the hearth was the place in the country where the civilization, sensibility and intuition of country life was handed on. This was never done in an analytic or discursive way. It was always in the form of the story. Around the hearth, the stories of our culture were told. And he goes on to say that sitting by the hearth, one's imagination was awakened and drawn into strange territories of the past through the images and events in the timelessness of story, because the hearth was a theatre of word, both in what you see in the flames and what would be said. I think it's so sad today that people are living in homes that do not have hearths or hearth spaces, and I think it's detrimental to humanity, really. I think we've grown up through the millennia with the fire, and we need to continue that because it does keep us in touch with something that is visceral, elemental, archaic, and we need to remember things don't just come that easily. We have to look after a fire, we have to nurture it and encourage it to burn, but we also have to make sure it doesn't go crazy and burn everything. So it's a relationship that has to be on mutual level of respect. So if you don't have a fireplace in your home, at least have a candle, because even a candle flame can be mesmerizing, can take you back into our early humanity, our earlier time together, and certainly evoke something within us that reminds us of our ancestors and our past. So I'm going to snuggle up now next to the fire, keep cozy, read a little bit more of John O'Donoghue's book, and just relax and just be, because it is that time of year where we should be relaxing and slowing down. And I wish you all the very best for the Samhain season. You know, it's not just one night, it's a season, and I hope you get a chance to relax and unwind as well by a cozy hearth. So all the best, and see you next week. I
I hope you enjoyed today's film. If you did, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And have a look at the website danusirishherbgarden.com for more information about us and about the herbal medicine courses I offer and the Wise Woman Way training. And if you go to the shop, you can find the books, the Weed Handbooks and other herbal goodies. And remember, we put a new film out every Sunday. So looking forward to seeing you next week.